I think it's safe to say that change is on my agenda. Change for good. And I embrace that and I enjoy that change. I don't fear it.
The moment Sophie reached the balcony door, the palace stopped breathing. This was not a forgotten invitation, not a harmless misunderstanding, and not a quiet reshuffling of royal protocol. It was a deliberate shutdown. William's office had issued the instruction, the door remained closed, and Sophie stood on the wrong side of a family moment that suddenly felt colder than any public scandal. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Sophie had arrived with the calm confidence of someone who believed her place was already secured. She had followed the usual route, accepted the quiet nods from staff, and carried herself with the careful dignity that had made her one of the family's most trusted figures. A royal balcony appearance, the public moment when senior family members stand together before the country as a sign of unity and rank, was never just a tradition. It was a message. It told the world who remained close, who still mattered, and who had not been pushed to the edges. The aide stepped forward before Sophie could pass. He did not raise his voice. He did not create a scene. That made it worse. His hand moved only slightly, enough to block the path, enough to say everything without saying too much. She looked at him, waiting for the correction, waiting for the small apology that would turn humiliation into confusion. It never came. The trusted confidant understood in that instant that this was not a mistake. Someone had prepared this. Someone had approved it. Someone wanted her stopped before the doors opened to the nation. William was nowhere near the threshold, but his authority filled the space like a cold command. The future king did not need to stand there for the message to reach her. His office, the private team that manages his duties, decisions, and official instructions, had moved with brutal precision. Palace staff had been told to refuse Sophie entry at the balcony door before the royal appearance began. Not after a discussion, not after a warning. Before the moment happened, the rejection was already waiting for her. Then the aide said the line that cut through every polite silence around them. The instruction came from the prince's office. Sophie's face tightened, not with rage, but with the deeper pain of someone suddenly forced to question years of loyalty. William had not simply left her off a list. He had allowed his name to become the lock on the door. Sophie stepped back, and the palace seemed to shift with her. The balcony was no longer the story. The closed door was. And as she turned away, one question began to burn through the silence. Why would William's office remove her from such a visible family moment? And who had convinced him she could no longer be trusted? Sophie had never been the loudest figure in the royal family, and that was exactly why this moment cut so deeply. She had built her reputation on discretion, patience, and loyalty. William had long understood the value of quiet support. Yet now, the future king's office had turned that quiet loyalty into a question mark, and Sophie was left wondering when trust became suspicion. Sophie had spent years moving through palace tension without feeding it. She knew when to speak, when to stay silent, and when to place duty above pride. That was why the refusal felt like a wound, delivered by someone who knew exactly where to strike. A working royal, a family member expected to carry out public duties, is not valued only for appearances. That role depends on trust, timing, and the belief that private conversations will remain private. William understood that better than anyone. The prince was no longer just a son, a husband, or a brother shaped by pain. He was the future king, and every decision around him now carried the weight of what his reign might become. One relaxed rule could look like weakness. One forgiven mistake could become a signal. One person allowed through the wrong door could tell the palace that his authority was softer than his office claimed. Sophie felt the sting because she had never treated loyalty as performance. She had given it quietly, through difficult years, through awkward rooms, through moments when louder voices pulled attention away from steadier service. Now the trusted confidant stood outside the circle, not because she had shouted, rebelled, or refused duty, but because someone inside William's office had marked her name with doubt. The humiliation was sharp. The suggestion beneath it was worse. William felt the pressure in a different way. He had not wanted a family member embarrassed, but the prince also knew that personal warmth could not be allowed to overrule institutional control. His office, the private team that manages his diary, decisions, and official instructions, had already moved before the balcony moment began. A private memo had circulated among senior staff, and Sophie's attendance had been marked with one cold word: sensitive. That word changed everything. It did not accuse her openly. It did not clear her either. It hinted at a breach of confidence that had never been settled, a conversation that had traveled farther than it should have, and a question William could no longer ignore. Sophie had been stopped at the door, but the real wound had opened earlier, in a private incident that turned a trusted confidant into a royal risk. The balcony refusal did not begin at the balcony. It began weeks earlier, behind polished doors, during what should have been a harmless private lunch. There were no cameras, no crowds, and no official speeches. Yet one conversation moved through the palace like smoke under a door. By the time William's office learned what had been said, the damage had already hardened into suspicion. Sophie had gone to St. James's Palace expecting courtesy, not danger. She believed the lunch with Camilla would be polite, careful, and forgettable. St. James's Palace, an old royal residence often used for formal meetings and private family business, carried a weight that made even casual conversations feel official. That mattered because words spoken there did not feel like gossip. They felt close to the center of power. Sophie knew that. The Queen Consort knew it too. Camilla asked about the coming balcony appearance with soft interest, never pressing too hard, never sounding hungry for detail. Sophie answered with the kind of careful warmth she had used for years, explaining that William wanted a smaller group, a cleaner message, and fewer chances for distraction. She thought she was giving harmless context. She did not think she was handing anyone a weapon, but the trusted confidant had said enough, and the Queen Consort heard more than Sophie realized. William had limited that balcony plan to a tight circle. The prince wanted the appearance to show discipline, because every balcony lineup told the country who stood nearest the future of the crown. The crown, the symbol of royal authority and continuity, was not just about ceremony in that moment. It was about control. If private planning escaped too early, William's authority would look fragile before he had even stepped forward. Sophie understood the danger only later. A documented account from a senior courtier described how Camilla's team seemed to know balcony details before the official circulation list had been finalized. The circulation list was simply the approved group of people allowed to receive sensitive palace plans. Sophie's stomach tightened when she heard that the same phrases she had used at lunch had returned to William's office almost word for word. She felt exposed. She felt foolish. She felt accused before anyone had spoken to her. William read the note in silence. His aide had placed it on his desk with one sentence underlined. Possible source: St. James's lunch. The prince did not shout. That made the moment colder. He stared at Sophie's name, then closed the folder with a slow, controlled hand. He felt betrayed because only a few people had known the plan, and she had been one of them. William did not confront Sophie that day. The future king chose distance instead of argument, procedure instead of pain. His office began preparing the instruction quietly, carefully, almost invisibly. The palace had not exploded yet, but behind the calm faces, a punishment was already being shaped. And Sophie had no idea she was walking toward it. Sophie did not shout when she was turned away. That made the moment even more dangerous. She waited until the aide stepped aside, then asked for William. Not through secretaries, not through another note. She wanted the man whose office had shut the door. Minutes later, in a narrow service corridor, the future king faced the woman who had just been excluded in his name. Sophie stood with the calm of someone holding herself together by force. The balcony appearance was still unfolding nearby, and that mattered because every second outside that door deepened the public lie of unity. A balcony appearance, the moment when the royal family stands together before the nation, is never only about smiling faces. It shows who belongs close to power. It shows who has been trusted to stand within reach of the crown. And Sophie had just been denied that signal in the most painful way possible. William arrived with his expression controlled, but the prince could not hide the tension in his jaw. He knew why she had asked for him. He knew what his office had done. Sophie looked at him for one long second before speaking, and her voice carried more hurt than anger. "If I am no longer trusted, say it to me directly." The words landed hard. They stripped away the comfort of procedure. They forced the future king to face the human cost of a decision made behind polished desks and careful language. William did not answer quickly. The silence became its own confession. He told Sophie the instruction had come through his office, and the trusted confidant heard what he did not say. He admitted the decision without explaining the full wound behind it. That restraint made the moment colder than fury. If he had shouted, Sophie could have fought back. If he had accused her openly, she could have defended herself. But the prince kept his voice low, and that made every word feel final. Sophie saw the truth before he named it. St. James's Palace, the private lunch, Camilla's careful questions, the details about the smaller balcony group moving through rooms they should never have reached. Her face changed as the pieces locked together, and William noticed. The queen consort had never needed to raise her voice to shift suspicion. She had only needed the right question, the right listener, and the right moment. William looked away for the first time. The prince was not defending a simple access list now. An access list, the approved group allowed into a royal event, had become a test of control, loyalty, and fear. "There are things I cannot risk now," he said. Sophie understood then that the door had not closed only against her. It had closed against uncertainty itself. And William was willing to hurt someone loyal if he believed the future of the monarchy demanded it. Power inside the monarchy rarely slammed its fist on a table. It moved quietly. It waited inside typed instructions, sealed folders, and careful phrases that sounded harmless until they ruined someone. William's office had become more than an administrative machine. It was now the gatekeeper of access, loyalty, and consequence. Sophie had been refused because someone decided symbolism mattered more than sentiment. William sat with the final balcony access list in front of him, knowing every name carried meaning. The list was not a simple guest plan. A balcony access list, the approved group allowed to stand together during a major royal appearance, worked like a public map of trust. That mattered because the country would read every absence as carefully as every smile. Sophie's removal would not be invisible. The trusted confidant would understand it. The family would understand it. And William knew the viewers would feel that something had shifted. The prince wanted the appearance to show unity, discipline, and a tighter monarchy under his growing influence. He believed the royal line had to look firm, not crowded by uncertainty. His private secretary hesitated before signing off, because the man understood that paperwork could wound as sharply as words. Sophie's name was not crossed out with anger. It was held back under a cold phrase, temporary restriction pending confidence review. A confidence review meant a private check into whether someone could still be trusted with sensitive plans. For Sophie, that phrase was devastating. William picked up the pen, then set it down. The movement was small, but it betrayed the weight of the decision. He was not blind to Sophie's years of service. He was not careless about what this would do to her pride. But the future king feared a softer danger. That one private leak, one repeated conversation, one loose thread, could make his authority look fragile before the next chapter had even begun. The folder held another shock. A second name sat beneath Sophie's on an internal watch list, suggesting the balcony refusal was only the first visible consequence of a wider trust crisis. William stared at that second line longer than expected. The prince understood then that the issue was spreading beyond one lunch, beyond one closed door, beyond one wounded woman. Charles received the briefing later and did not speak at first. The king looked down at the order, then at William, and his silence carried a strange recognition. He understood palace fear. He understood family pain. And when the monarch finally closed the file, the consequences began moving faster than anyone inside the palace could control from that moment onward. The first fallout was not heard in a press room. It was seen in Sophie's face when she returned to the private apartments and removed her gloves without speaking. For years, she had mastered composure. But this was different. This was family rejecting family through protocol. And once the balcony appearance ended, the silence around Sophie became louder than any public statement. Sophie entered the sitting room as if every step had become heavier. Edward looked up and knew at once that something had gone wrong. The private apartments, the family rooms away from public duty where royal figures can speak more honestly, were meant to offer shelter from ceremony. That mattered because Sophie had not been hurt by strangers. She had been hurt by a decision carrying William's authority, delivered inside the machinery of the family itself. Outside, the official appearance continued, and that contrast made the wound sharper. Public unity was still being performed while private trust was breaking apart. Edward watched her place her gloves down with unusual care. He did not ask the first question loudly. He simply said her name, and the tenderness in his voice nearly broke her restraint. Sophie told him she had been stopped at the balcony door. Then she said the words that changed his expression completely. "William's office refused me entry." Edward's face hardened, not with confusion, but disbelief. The rejection had not come from a junior misunderstanding. It had come through a channel that carried power. Sophie kept her voice low, but each sentence carried humiliation. The aide had not told her, "Not today." He had said she was not cleared. That phrase mattered because it was not social language. It sounded like security, judgment, and suspicion. Clearance, permission granted after someone is approved for access, made the moment feel less like a family decision and more like a formal warning. Sophie understood the meaning. Edward understood it too. The trusted confidant had not simply been left out. She had been treated as someone whose presence needed approval. Edward pushed back from his chair and wanted to find William immediately. Sophie stopped him before anger could become spectacle. She would not let her pain be turned into corridor drama. She had already been reduced once by a closed door, and she refused to be reduced again by a confrontation carried on other people's whispers. Edward sat back slowly, but his silence had changed. He now understood that this was no scheduling mistake. It was a controlled exclusion with institutional force behind it. Charles requested a private briefing before the family could settle into shock. The king wanted the file, the explanation, and the names behind the order. William was summoned away, and the air tightened again. What began as Sophie's private wound was now entering the hands of the monarch, and the next conversation would decide whether the family fracture widened or finally faced the truth. There were no aides in the room when William finally sat across from Sophie. No private secretary. No courtier. No typed instruction placed between them. Just two members of the same family, separated by a decision neither could pretend was harmless. Sophie wanted dignity restored. William wanted certainty. For the first time, the monarchy's machinery fell silent, and the human cost became impossible to avoid. William had agreed to the meeting only after Charles made one thing clear. The king would not allow a family wound to be handled only through offices, files, and careful phrases. A private secretary, the senior aide who manages confidential decisions for a royal figure, could carry instructions, but he could not heal humiliation. That mattered because Sophie had not been hurt by public critics. She had been hurt by a decision carrying William's authority, and only the prince could answer for that. Sophie sat across from him with her hands still, but her voice carried the strain of someone who had spent hours holding pain behind dignity. She admitted she had spoken too freely during the St. James's Palace lunch. She did not hide from that. She told William she had answered Camilla's questions because the conversation had felt polite, careful, and harmless. But the trusted confidant denied trying to weaken him. She had never wanted to feed palace tension. She had never wanted to become the name attached to betrayal. William listened without interrupting. The prince looked tired, not because he doubted the damage, but because he finally saw the shape of it. Sophie was not raging. She was wounded. That made his own decision harder to defend. He told her he had felt trapped between family affection and the need to protect a fragile future reign. A future reign means the period when William would one day rule as monarch, and every choice now was shaping what kind of king he would become. He could not let private plans drift from room to room. He could not let uncertainty stand beside him on the balcony. Sophie then revealed what changed the whole weight of the meeting. In a recorded private account, prepared later for Charles, she explained that Camilla had guided the lunch conversation toward balcony details with careful, repeated questions. The queen consort had not demanded anything. She had drawn the information out softly, making the moment feel less like a leak and more like a trap Sophie had not recognized until too late. William's expression shifted. The prince did not excuse her carelessness, but he no longer saw only disloyalty. Sophie had been unguarded, perhaps even naive, but not cruel, not dangerous in the way his office had feared. He did not reverse the decision that day. The balcony door had already closed, but he made one promise, and Sophie heard the weight inside it. She would not be left publicly undefended. That promise did not erase the wound, but it changed what came next. Because outside the palace, the world had already begun writing its own version of her humiliation. By morning, the private wound had become public theater. The image was simple and brutal. Sophie approaching a balcony door, then turning away while the royal family appeared without her. No statement could soften it. No palace phrase could hide it. A single closed door had become a symbol, and Britain woke to a monarchy that suddenly looked united only from a distance. Sophie saw the newspaper at breakfast, before anyone could move it away. The headline cut straight through the room, "Shut out at the balcony." A newspaper front page matters because it turns a private palace moment into a national judgment. freezing one painful second into something millions can discuss, repeat, and remember. Edward reached toward the paper, but Sophie folded it first. She did not cry. She did not defend herself. The trusted confidant simply placed it beside her cup, and that quiet act made the humiliation feel heavier than any outburst could have done. William watched the same coverage elsewhere in silence. The prince had expected questions, but not this level of emotional force. Broadcasters framed the refusal as his first visible act of internal discipline within the working royal family. A working royal means a family member who carries out official duties on behalf of the monarchy, and that label mattered because Sophie had earned it through service, not spectacle. The future king had protected order, but the screen told a harsher story. It showed a loyal woman excluded, and it made discipline look dangerously close to cruelty. The palace response arrived with careful restraint. It did not deny the refusal. It did not explain the lunch. It simply stated that balcony attendance had been carefully managed. The phrase sounded clean, but it left too much unsaid. Sophie understood that silence could protect William, but it could also leave her standing alone in the public imagination. The trusted confidant had already been denied entry once. Now she feared being denied sympathy too. Outside Buckingham Palace, a small crowd gathered near the gates and argued over the meaning of the image. Some said Sophie had been punished unfairly. Others said William had finally drawn a hard line after years of loose palace loyalties. The prince knew both readings carried danger. If he said nothing, the story would harden around her humiliation. If he spoke too much, he risked exposing the private breach that had started it all. William finally turned away from the coverage, but the damage had already reached him. The monarchy could survive one harsh headline, but it could not survive the appearance of cruelty without an answer, and the future king knew the final move had to come from him. In the end, the balcony door did not destroy Sophie. It revealed her. It showed her pain, her restraint, and the cost of standing inside a family where love and duty are never easily separated. It also revealed William, not as a man untouched by feeling, but as a future king learning that control without compassion can look dangerously close to betrayal. William arranged for Sophie to attend the next major family service in a visible position, and that choice mattered. A family service, a formal royal gathering tied to worship, remembrance, or national duty, is never just a private act. It tells the public who has been restored, who remains trusted, and who still belongs close to the center. The prince did not pretend the balcony refusal had never happened. He chose a quieter form of repair, one that gave the trusted confidant dignity without turning the wound into another spectacle. Sophie accepted the restoration with grace, but grace did not erase pain. She stood where the family could see her, steady and composed. Yet the hurt remained between her and William like a mark neither could fully remove. The future king understood it too. In a private conversation later recorded in a family account prepared for Charles, he apologized in measured words. He did not apologize for protecting the monarchy. He apologized for allowing the decision to wound her so publicly. Charles listened when the account reached him. The king knew that apology mattered because monarchy survives not only through control, but through the belief that loyalty will not be punished without compassion. He also understood that the St. James's Palace lunch had become more than an uncomfortable memory. It was now the trigger everyone inside the family recognized, the moment that exposed how easily trust could be guided, tested, and manipulated. Camilla's role in drawing out the balcony details was never publicly addressed. The queen consort remained outside the official explanation, and that silence said everything. William did not need a public accusation to change his circle. The prince tightened access, reduced casual briefings, and made sure sensitive plans moved through fewer hands. Sophie had been careless, but she had not been cast out. Camilla had asked the questions, but she did not control the final verdict. The balcony door had closed for one afternoon, but the lesson lasted far longer. Sophie was not destroyed. William was not weakened. The monarchy learned that loyalty cannot be managed only through locked doors, cold phrases, and private orders. In the final judgment, this was not the story of a woman pushed out forever. It was the story of a family forced to learn that power without mercy can protect a crown while damaging the people asked to stand beneath it. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.